Let's begin module 2 of the class, and we're going to start by talking about closed loop systems. And these are an idea of really where you're getting feedback from the environment or the outcome of the motion to provide yourself with some sort of idea or consequence of your action. So we're going to break this down and to show you what all goes into it, right? And so there's a reference mechanism. And this is responsible for measuring the difference between whatever your goal was in the actual state. And here it's called reference of mechanism, and it's also called reference of correctness. But this is the idea of your body, your idea of the information processing produces some sort of blueprint, some sort of output. And then it's that goal. So this is the difference between the goal and the actual state, right? And then you have an executive level, and this is the decision location, and this is meant to address the error between the info and the desired level, right? So what it all comes down to here is that through the process, you created this idea of what the task was, and then you had the actual outcome measurement. And then so the executive level is going to help identify which ways that you are going to address this error here that has been measured by this reference of correctness. And here you have two things, right? So you have the system goal, and then the input coming into the reference mechanism is actually the feedback from your output of whatever you're putting into the system. And after the executive level, now you have an effector level. And the effector level is producing those instructions from the executive level. So the executive level gives instructions to the executive level. And that is the portion where you are activating certain portions to make changes in whatever your desired outcome was. And so now you're creating this output, and the output is to adjust whatever your original blueprint or whatever your original goal was to adjust the new movement outcome. And then the environment, and this is where you're sampling that feedback. That's where you're sampling whatever your output is, creating new input as form of feedback. And it's this closed loop, so it continues to go back up to the reference mechanism, right? And so this executive level is producing this blueprint that is going to the effector level. And the effector level, think about this as your motor units, right? So the executive level is the higher order, so think about this as a CNS. Think about this as the motor units, creating the motor neurons generating the input signal and the activations and the magnitudes going to the muscles. And then you produce that outcome or that movement into the environment, and then this produces some sort of feedback that goes through the system, and it's allowing you to measure the feedback versus your blueprint of what you should have produced. And that creates this idea of error. So, right, so the difference between the blueprint and the feedback of the actual output you did is taken by the reference mechanism, and it's called the reference of correctness, and we'll talk about that. And you get the error, and then so this cycle continues until you actually stop the movement. So this closed loop model kind of fits two categories, and those are this rapid movements where you just complete a task, or it's an ongoing movement, right? And so in how the closed loop fits the rapid movement is it gives you a correct or an incorrect in your idea of the outcome movement, right? So if I'm throwing darts, quickly I know if I hit the dartboard or not where I wanted to by the result, or if I was trying to catch a ball, or one of those tasks that just happens quickly, and it's a rapid, but not only rapid movement, but a discrete movement where there's no one's end. And then you have these ongoing movements, and this is where you have the ability to adjust the pattern of motion, right? So whether or not I'm walking or paddling or doing something where I can constantly adjust whatever I'm doing through the environment. And so there's some regulation at a constant values, right? So some sort of velocity movement. And oftentimes this is referring to some tracking task where we are constantly adjusting our pattern based off of our feedback giving in the system. And so remember this RC, so this RC, anytime you see it, it stands for reference of correctness. And in that initial one, it talked about the reference mechanism. And the reference mechanism is simply that, the reference of correctness. So the reference of correctness or reference mechanism is that measurement, that difference between the desired blueprint of your motion and the outcome of your motion, measuring, and that's where you measure the error. So how do you change that? Well, it allows movements to be measured against a predicted location and pattern. And so Adams, in his theory of learning, so you can develop numerous sets of these reference correctnesses to track using an open loop system, or can you do that? And the idea is this: if we did a point-by-point calculation or computation throughout our movements, then it would be too tasking. And oftentimes we talk about an outfielder going after catching the ball. And if I'm Mike Trout, I'm an Angels fan, so I apologize, but Mike Trout is very good at just running to the point and catching amazing balls. But if he continued to do a point-by-point computation, he would not be able to do it because it would slow his process down. So these information processing stages slow the closed loop by doing this repeated point-by-point computation. So the idea is that we have a number of references of correctness that allow us to remove this need to go point by point. And the only way you build up these references of correctness is through practice and repetitions.